Welcome to Life Mastery. I started this podcast for a couple of reasons. One is a bit selfish. I love spending time speaking and learning from interesting people. The second is that I want this to be a bit of a toolkit for everyone, young and old, to learn from people with diverse experiences and background. You'll hear conversations with entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, health experts, top corporate leaders, and more. They all have something valuable to share about what really matters in life. Along the way, I'll also share some of my own experiences, the wins, the losses, the risks, and the moments of joy and tragedy. So listen with an open mind, and hopefully you'll take away something valuable. Enjoy. On this episode of Life Mastery, I interview my very good friend, Ganan Kanagathuri, who is one of the most inspiring and interesting career paths of anyone that I know. At 38, he became the CEO of Itsu, the Asian-inspired multinational food business and one of the most respected food brands in the UK. And currently, he is the co-owner of Roti King. Now, if you know anything about the London food scene, you'll have seen Roti King restaurants pop up around the city, and very often with queues outside. We talk about his journey from corporate life in London and LA and back again, where he worked for some of the largest companies in the world and worked his way up to very senior positions. And we get into the nitty-gritty of how that shaped his current view of life and what's really important, and why he replaced the regular paycheck and high-flying corporate career and what many would consider the perfect career for the fast-moving and very risky food and restaurant business. Enjoy. Ganan, good to see you. You're somebody who I've known for a long time, and I would say you're a bit of a rare breed when it comes to the path that you've taken. And I say that because I've got a lot of friends who have either taken an entrepreneurial path or they've taken a corporate path. And not many people mix it up. And when I say that, like, you have worked in the corporate world for best part of 18 to 20 years, and then you've decided to walk away from it, and now you've set up Roti King, and we can go into that a little bit later. But why don't you just give us a bit of a brief history of your career and how you've got to this place now?
Sure, yeah. I probably left uni like 90% of kids not really knowing what I wanted to do. I probably went into uni not really knowing what I wanted to do. I just did what I enjoyed and what I was good at. I did kind of maths and stats and all that kind of stuff, but didn't really have a game plan.
Which uni was it? Was it UCL?
I went to UCL, yeah. In London. And then as I left uni, I just went to get the first job that paid me the most amount of money, if I'm honest. And that comes from my background, my history. I just had to go and figure out how to help my mum out, pay some bills and all that kind of stuff. So it was really driven by a very different necessity than plotting out a career and a journey and all that kind of stuff. It was just born out of a basic necessity.
And what was it, that job?
I went to work at Merrill Lynch, which is
an investment bank.
Big bank, as you know. And I went to work in private clients, which is quite of a weird place. I got the job through a friend of a friend and all that kind of stuff. And they don't take graduates into the actual department, or they didn't at the time. I don't know if they do now. So there were no formal structures. There was no kind of placements and all that kind of stuff. They just threw me in the deep end with people who didn't really want me there, probably. Yeah. And I absolutely hated it. I did 8 months there and realized that I just wasn't going to be successful there. I didn't like the culture, the environment. And even at a very early age, I didn't really understand what culture and environment were. I just knew that I just didn't want to be there. What
were the kind of things that you didn't like at that time?
I just think the way that people treated each other. I mean, again, I think banking's a very good career for the right kind of person, and it just wasn't the right career for me. I haven't always been financially motivated, even though I took that job very much for financial motivation. I now realize that isn't the right way to make decisions, especially in your career at an early age, and just the way that people treated each other around there, because it was very much the first interactions I saw in the workplace were how those individuals treated each other, and I just didn't really appreciate the way they would treat each other, the politics, crap that happens in those places. It may just be that, it may have been just that bank, it may have been just that division, I'm not sure, but I just didn't really enjoy the kind of environment. And
so you leave there, and then what do you go?
So I left there. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went and trained as an accountant. I went to work at Ernst & Young, again, just because that's what you do. If you can get in, I was very fortunate. Again, I applied to all the big four. I got offers from, I think, 3 out of the 4. And I picked Ernst & Young just because I liked the 2 people who interviewed me. Again, it was just a good fit. It just felt right. Yeah. And I felt like they all kind of did the same thing. They look after their people. They all say the right things. Yeah. And I just really liked the people who interviewed me. And actually, if I'm honest, the people that interviewed me were very diverse in their backgrounds, in their skin colors. There was a man and a woman, and everybody else interviewed me was pretty much white and male. So I just felt like I fitted in there, which was just the choice I made at the time, rightly or wrongly. Yeah. So I went and did that. I trained as an accountant. I've never done an accounting job in my life, but trained as an accountant, and I really enjoyed it. It's a very different culture. The Big Four culture is very different to kind of banking culture in those days. And I worked there for about 1.5 years. And then I moved. I went to work for Disney. One of my clients was Disney. I worked for them in the UK. And then I was fortunate enough to get asked to move to LA to go and work for Disney out there. So I was a kind of young, impressionable 24-year-old. Yeah. And one of the guys I was working for, my client, said, I'm going back to start up a practice and so on and so forth inside Disney. Do you want to come and help me figure it out?
Was this in accountancy as well?
This was more in kind of corporate finance
stuff.
So I went to work in Disney's kind of corporate finance team in their office. And that was only meant to be an 18-month secondment, and ended up turning into 6.5 years, which was great again.
In LA?
In LA, yeah. So I spent my first half my working life in America, half of it here.
So it sounds like up to that point, for a lot of people who would be listening to this, young people, would be thinking, that sounds like a pretty cool path, man.
It was great. Like I said, I was a young, single, 24-year-old guy, got asked to go to LA. It was almost a no-brainer, and I just made the decision. I literally, and maybe this is the first bit of advice I would give people watching this is, I just sat there and, I spent probably 2 weekends agonizing over the decision. And, you had to think about personal life and family, and I'm an only child from a single mum. And so I had all these different things. I had to leave my mum on her own and all these different, kind of interconnecting decisions I had to make. And then the bit that got me was when somebody told me, or I figured out for myself, I can't remember, what's the worst that can happen? And this is always a phrase I use when I'm making big life decisions. I go, what's the worst that can happen? And I realized the worst that can happen is I don't like it, and I just end up coming back and slotting back into my own life, lost 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of my life, whatever. It's not really a big deal. And then you weigh up what could happen on the upside, and you go, actually, this kind of makes sense. So, that's all I did. I kind of agonized for 2 weekends, and literally over 5 minutes, I was like, I did that. And I go, it's an absolute no-brainer. There's hardly any downside, lots of upside. And I thought, screw it, I'm going to go do it. So I jumped in the deep end. I turned 18 months into 6, 7 great years. I worked my way through that organization, doing lots of different stuff. I was working in the media industry, in Hollywood, things that I never planned and dreamed of, right? You just end up finding paths and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of 6.5 years, I had to weigh up. Again, I was 30 then, so I'd done my late 20s in LA. Met lots of great people, made lots of great friends that I'm very close with now.
Before we continue, is it like they say it is in terms of LA and Hollywood, that everyone around that industry kind of knows each other?
No. I mean, it's a weird place if you've never been there. But when you watch movies and you come from London or other cities in Europe, you have this view of LA that's very different. And there's kind of, I mean, I haven't been there for now 10 years, but I haven't lived there for a long time. Then it was very much a city of, I mean, it's a huge city. It's like a metropolis. It's like lots of different cities all in one, and the traffic's shit. It's horrendous. But it's a city full of the entertainment people. Some of them are nice and some of them are not so nice. And then you just got normal people, if that's the right phrase, people who just have jobs like us and do things and get on and go to school and go to uni and get on with their lives. So you have this and they mix because the culture and the underbelly of the city is still kind of Hollywood and the entertainment business, but it's very, very different. And the bit I learned, if I'm honest, the bit I learned from that experience, well, I got to 30, whatever, and then I had to decide if I was going to really lay some roots down here and build a career here in the industry, think about family, think about all that stuff. When you get to that age, I guess that's what you start thinking about, or you get forced to think about. Or was I going to come back and then think differently? And if I'm honest, I did 6-7 good years there. But I realized that my personality, and as you get older, you get a bit wiser, a bit more mature, you make mistakes, and you learn from it. I realized that the industry wasn't for me, and it took me a long time to understand why. I just didn't realize, I didn't think I could get as far as I wanted to in terms of my drive and my ambition and where I wanted to get to. One, because an industry like the media industry, if you're not front of camera, if you're not a creative, if you're not talent, you're always behind the camera in an office doing something and always being in the back office of something. Yeah, it's very hard to get to the top of organizations or companies. It's like if you're a footballer and you're a striker, it's a lot easier to get the fame than it is to be a defender, that kind of analogy. So I realized that I was always going to play defense in an industry like that because I didn't have the creative talent to be in the sector. But I realized, and again, this is just a individual thing, and I think everybody needs to, if you're going to pick an industry to work in or a business or a product or something, you've got to find an industry, a sector or something that you're doing that you can really resonate with. And I found that the intangibility of the media industry very, very difficult. And this is why I don't like tech either. For me, like going and working in tech, even though I'm not a techie, and I wouldn't be very good at it either. I find the fact that you can't touch and feel the product, I find that very difficult. That's just me and my makeup and how I'm wired. So that's why I just didn't enjoy that. I didn't think that the future was the right thing for me, and therefore I left.
So just jumping in, if you're working in accountancy or corporate finance, would you not say it's fair to say that there's always going to be an element of you working in the background rather than at the forefront of an organisation?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, unless you go work in a bank or you go and do other things, or you go and work in a consultancy business and all that kind of stuff. So if you're in ultimately a back office skill set, you're going to have to make peace if that's what you want your future to be. And I bet you start to be, I've moved careers and done different things because of this, even though that's where I started my career, that's not where I've ended it. And I've now ended up in the front office. Yeah. But that's because I've realized that's where I needed to traverse. But I think you're right. If you go into this with an open mind, if you want to work in industry for companies, but you do say that. I read a stat only a year ago or 6 months ago that 60% of FTSE 100 or FTSE 250 CEOs are all CFOs. Right. So there's no reason why. So a lot of people move up the finance. If we talk about finance, they move up the finance kind of hierarchy, and then they move across. Okay. Or you move across early into marketing or sales or the front office stuff, and then you go up. But there are lots of ways to get to where you want to get to. I don't think you have to always assume that you start off in the back. You kind of end up in the back, I guess.
So you come back from LA, or you decide that you want to come back from LA, and then what happens?
Yeah, I came back from LA. I came back to the UK. I did an MBA in between. Again, I don't really know why I did it. And now I look back on it, I'm not sure why I did it.
Again, was that because it was one of those things that people at that time, say, 2010, were saying an MBA is a really valuable tool to have. You've been in industry for a while, go and do an MBA, and you'll be able to get much
more
better
money, better jobs. I mean, look, I was in a gap in my life, if you like. I wanted to take a step back from working life and just reassess where I am. I was a bit, as I said, older and wiser, and I had a bit more experience to lean on. And I just did it because it just felt like what you do. But it's what you do if you need it. Right. And I just did it because, I mean, look, I had a great time. I met some great people, but I had an economics degree. I was a qualified accountant. The first year was all economics and accounting. And I got exemptions from half of it. Right. And so the first year I didn't do anything. Yeah. Well, not didn't do anything, it's a bit unfair, but I didn't learn a lot. Whereas, I was in class with one ex NFL football player, a conductor in the New York Philharmonic or something. All these ex-Army and Navy guys. Those guys didn't have the background I had, so it made a lot of sense for them to go from there into traversing the more business and commercial world. So I did that anyway. I did that for 18 months, 2 years, it was great. I made a lot of friends, and still use that network. That's probably the most powerful thing about the MBA is your network. And if you need the knowledge, then great, you can go and get it. But I think I would have been a better professional working for 2 years and not doing that. So my second year, I did it part-time. My first year, I did it full-time, whatever. And then, again, so up until this stage, I'm now 35, still don't know what I want to do in my life, still just going through life, taking opportunities, jumping on whichever horse seems right, but making good decisions now, not born out of money, not born out of pride and, I want to go and work there because it's cool and all that stuff. I'm actually now 35 making life choices about jobs, but I think from a positive lens.
So what would be making an example of making a life choice for a job?
So changing industries, changing countries, thinking, do I want to come back to the UK and live and work? That's a big life choice. Yeah. Because that means at that age, not always, but for me anyway, I was then going, this is 10 years for me. I may have kids here. I may actually lay roots here. So that's a big life decision, less a business decision. Industry you want to work in. But also just going, I've jumped on this train. I've gone through different places. I've gone to different countries. I've taken a step back. Where am I going to lay some roots, lifestyle-wise? But where am I going to lay some roots work-wise?
And just a bit of an observation. What would you say the difference would have been had you laid your roots in LA? And it doesn't matter about the person you've met or anything like that, but I'm just talking about the life that you would have had versus London.
It's hard because you can't live two parallel lives to answer that question. Look, I generally think I would have been relatively successful either way. I think I'd have been less successful in LA because it probably would have meant staying in that industry. And if you're not passionate about something, it's very hard to be good at it. I just generally think if you really don't live it, breathe it, and really, really love it every morning, it's hard to motivate yourself. It's hard to push through. It's hard to achieve and succeed. So I haven't had a chance to think about it until you asked me the question, but I genuinely believe I probably wouldn't have been as further through my career and succeeded, wherever you put the definition of success on, if I had stayed there. And I think that's the whole reason why I left. It just didn't feel right for me. Yeah. And
So mid-30s, you're continuing on with your career. Then what was the next step from there?
Mid-30s, I went around. So I went to talk to a lot of people about, these are my skills, this is what I enjoy. I was really thinking about where to grow roots. I was really, again, now making conscious choices about the next 5 years, 10 years or whatever. Not wanting to be that 25-year-old kid just going, I'll just jump to the shiniest thing or the newest thing. I was really trying to make some active or proactive choices. And with all that planning and all that thinking, I spoke to a headhunter who called me, actually. I don't even call them, called me, and they said, we've been given your name by someone. That's what headhunter. I still don't understand that whole business. It's like a dark art, that headhunter thing. We've been given your name by someone. There's this interesting thing that we've got. Do you want to hear it and see if it fits? I said, yeah, sure. And they said one of the country's largest companies, publicly listed business, one of the largest retailers in the world, is trying to do things differently, trying to shake the trees and see what falls out. They're doing different things and trying to be different. And you're quite different. Do you want to come and see? Do you want to shake some trees and see what falls out or whatever? Yeah. And I said, yeah, this sounds super exciting. So for all that planning and all that thinking and all that structure I wanted to put behind my life, I ended up doing what I've done the first 10 years of my life, which is just kind of going to the new, interesting, shiny things, and ended up working for Tesco for 6 years. Again, I joined, it's quite interesting. I think it's interesting. I joined Tesco without a job, without a role. Right. So going, when you apply for a job, you go, this is a role, this is a job description. Okay. I mean, I knew my salary because that would be a bit crazy, but I didn't actually know what I was going to do on my first day. So they were basically trying to find people from all around the world who were I guess the phrase they didn't use at the time, but the phrase I'd use now is they were very, very diverse.
Yeah.
But not in the definitions of the way we think of diversity now. Although I'm sure there was part of that. They probably wanted more women at senior leadership positions, more ethnic minorities, all that stuff. But actually it was more about kind of skill set diversity. What they had told me is that they had realized that at their board, there were actually maybe indirectly lots of old white and male people, but it was more about they had people who had come from the shops. And they had been store managers and they had been operations managers and then they'd run their property teams and then they've gone and sat on the board. And obviously the problem with that, and it's the same thing with any axis of diversity, when you got people that think the same, whether men, women,
the same thing.
Or experience-wise, they have the same answer to the same problem. And this is where Tesco were going. In the future, this is going to be a problem. So let's go and find some people from lots of different places who look different, sound different, come from different countries, different industries, who can hopefully grow through the trees and help us think differently. That was a whole sell. And that was super exciting for me. That was like, come and help the country's largest retailer to think differently.
Just go back to your first day. Like, your job was, haven't got a job, yeah? All right.
So I went and joined, the country's largest retailer, went to shake some trees and see what falls out. So I ended up working in their non-food digital business. So what was Tesco Direct? They're basically online strategy. And they were building, which is quite exciting. They were worried about Amazon online, and Amazon was just kind of making its way in the UK and I guess around the world. And they wanted to build a competing website, a competing non-food proposition online to counteract Amazon and all that kind of stuff. So I was part of that team for a while, which was great. It's very, very different to me, but that's where I really appreciated the pace, the speed, and the tangibility, as I said, of kind of retail, hospitality, all the stuff you can touch and feel products, you can understand customers, you can get to customers' heads and really understand it, which is what I struggled with in the media industry. So I went to do that I did that for a couple of years. And then I got approached internally to help build, I was one of the kind of initial team that helped build, I guess the best way to call it is kind of Tesco's corporate venturing unit. So it was a kind of very small, I call it a venture capital unit, or that's maybe a wanky term, but it was a very small kind of group of people that were tasked from the board directly. And we had a guy who kind of just sat on the board who ran the team. And that team was tasked with trying to figure out how a big oil tanker like Tesco could play culturally and operationally with this kind of entrepreneurial movement that was happening. So the entrepreneurial movement was picking up pace, and there were brands, experts, and entrepreneurs that were doing really interesting things in the kind of food sector, in hospitality, retail, all that kind of stuff.
So what would be an example? Would they be looking for startups who are in that sector, food?
So they were looking for, so the stuff that we started to look at was either, so for example, the Tesco bakery category was an old archaic category selling, kind of white and brown bread and all the staples that people buy. But actually there was a big customer base that wanted more artisanal products. Customers were being educated on better quality breads, cakes, all that kind of stuff. And therefore Tesco realized in some of its more affluent stores, they needed a different proposition. So they could do what every other big company does normally, which is just, let's go and create Tesco Finest or go and create a different brand themselves. But actually big corporates are not good at creating brands. Or they could go and find a way to invest in, partner with, and scale other brands.
And that's interesting.
That's an example of,
because what a lot of big companies, what people don't understand is that big companies might struggle with that because just of a decision-making cycle takes so long to get something like that off the ground.
I mean, honestly, that in hindsight, and the bit that you talked about, my career, about wanting to get out of corporates as well, this was the defining moment for me.
Yeah.
As we did lots of good stuff, I mean, this was Tesco really trying to think differently. There was no playbook. No one had done this before. There was no kind of, this is how you do it. We were figuring it out and making mistakes all the time. And ultimately, that team got disbanded for lots of reasons. I mean, we also made some mistakes and invested in the wrong things, but also the whole Tesco ship started stinking, the accounting scandal, all that drama. But as I look back on it, or as I dissected that time, and I thought, why didn't that work? Like, what was the reason that didn't work? I then realized very quickly that, as you said, corporates can't do that stuff. Not that they didn't have the will to do it. They really wanted to do it, right from the board, all the way up. But the sacrifices that you have to make that thing work, and the people that you need to think differently, or then anyway, I mean, and again, I speak from my own experience, it's a bit unfair to paint a broad brush, but they just don't exist in the corporate world. People are trained to think differently, as you said, the big, slow processes. Everyone's worried about their job. Everyone's only worried about the next 2 years because I won't be in this job for another 2 years. So I've just got to keep my head down, do my bit, get my promotion. Then I go and work in alcohol, or I go and work in bakery, I go and work in non-food, and I'll leave the other idiot to figure out all my problems, and they can figure it out. No one's really thinking long-term in those jobs. And that's, honestly, this is part of the challenge.
And it's funny that, because I bet the board level, their strategy is the next 15, 20 years, isn't it?
Yeah. But the guys on the ground making decisions, and look, it's easy to sit here and criticize and whatever, but
it's human nature.
Yeah, it's human nature. And look, these are great companies that do amazing things, and they 60 billion of turnover or what it is. They're not idiots at these places. They're smart people, but they're wired very, very differently. And I realized, I think it was this experience that made me realize that working in the corporate was just not for me. So and it took me 15 years to figure it out, which was part of the shame. But that's how you learn.
One of the questions I've got is about some of the decisions that you made, especially in terms of investing. What were some of the mistakes, if you're comfortable sharing, that you made when you were looking at the investment arm of Tesco's?
The biggest mistake we made, and now the thing that I only ever do, is you don't invest in products, you don't invest in synergies, you don't invest in business plans and Excel, you invest in people. And we were so desperate to move quickly, because that's what you're meant to do. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't be slow like Tesco. You just have to move quickly, because that's the definition, which it isn't. You have to move quickly, but you have to move well, not just quickly. And in our desperation to move quickly, we literally didn't say no to anyone. So the first bakery business, that'll do. The first restaurant, that'll do. The first entrepreneur, that'll do. Because we were so desperate to just get stuff done. Because we were so committed to not do the Tesco thing. And the Tesco thing is a very good thing. That's why the business is so good. But we forgot the kind of, the first rule of investing, or whatever you want to call it, which is you got to invest in people. And that's what we didn't do. And that's my biggest learning, is we just moved too quickly. And we didn't say no. We just took, it's just like the first cab off the rank, you will do. Here's 10 million, here's 50 million, here's 20 million. Those are the kind of numbers we were playing with. And it was a tough time.
And would you then try and integrate them into the wider business? Yeah.
And that was always the theory. So we bought a restaurant business, and we go, well, they buy Corona for, I don't know, whatever, £1.50 a bottle. Tesco buys it for 60p a bottle, because it's the biggest scale purchaser of alcohol in the country. So that obviously makes sense. We'll just tap them into the Tesco network, and we'll all make it happen. And they buy burger buns and beef patties and whatever. So it's just, there's an obvious, if you build it in Excel, it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
You actually try and do it and build these cultures together. The kind of juggernaut corporate oil tanker and the speedboat, and you try to get these things together, it all makes sense. Why would you not want to buy the same bottle of Corona for half the price? Culturally is where it all breaks down.
And that could be and that could be as simple as the guy who owns that restaurant, who buys the Corona normally, who used to ringing up the supplier and saying, send me the Corona. Now he's got to go through Tesco, and somebody in Tesco saying, well, hang on a minute, we have to follow this procedure, we have to fill in these forms, and it's just a time that...
It's even more basic than that. It is the alcohol buyer in Tesco, who we have to go and talk to say, can I have some of your Corona? What he should do, and it's not his fault actually, it's just how the system is. He's managed on a margin target and a percentage, let's say. The guy that owns, in a corporate sector, that department and our department doesn't care if the margin is there or there, because it all goes up to him. Well, it goes to the board, it goes to the shareholders, whatever. It doesn't matter. He cares where that margin sits, because he's got targets, he's got a bonus, he doesn't get kind of promote. Tesco's was, I talk about Tesco's, that's the only experience I've got, but it was all about hitting your numbers. And that's what a lot of corporates are. That's how they judge. If you're good enough, here's your budget, did you hit your number? Because in a large corporate, any corporate, Tesco, Disney, anywhere, the whole thing only works when everybody does their bit. So every country has to do their numbers, then the whole company does their numbers. Every department has to do the country numbers, then it all adds up from the bottom. It's the only way these things work, right? So there was this anal need to hit your numbers. So just to tell you that story, they go, the alcohol buyer would not sell me Corona at the cost price, even though that's the right thing to do for the growth of the company, because that would affect his margin, because he'd sell that for zero margin. But he's selling volume at zero margin, his own margin's coming out. He's like, well, that's not good for me. He's thinking about himself.
Yeah.
And he's not paid to, and he shouldn't, think about the company. That's where somebody at a board level or somebody senior should go, I'm going to change your target so that you can help those guys, and then the whole thing moves. But no one did that, because no one thinks differently.
Yeah.
Because you've been wired to think the same way for 20 years. And that's the bit that it's the culture and the structure of corporates. They find it very hard to do these kind of things, and they probably shouldn't, is the truth, because they have to run a business very, very differently.
And then was it then you decided to leave Tesco at that point?
So then I left. If I'm honest, I was probably on the way out anyway, just because the ship was sinking. I was learning all these things about myself and about where I wanted to go. And, I joined probably Tesco and maybe Disney, and maybe even before that, I had this drive, I had this ambition to succeed. And I wanted to always be I thought success was defined by the size of my paycheck, but also your title, who you are. I walk into a room and go, I'm the CEO of Tesco. And everyone goes, wow, you're successful. And then obviously you make a lot of money because you're at the top of that tree. So being this big cog in a big machine was always this thing that felt the right thing. That's the pinnacle of life, is to be a big cog in a big machine. I realized through 6 years at Tesco and perhaps at Disney, I was probably too young to learn all this stuff at Disney, but definitely at Tesco, that the best people don't get to the top of corporate organizations. And that doesn't mean there aren't very good people at the top of organizations. There are, they're just very different, but they're not the best. How, in the way you define who's the best.
So we've got two things there. So how would you define what the best that you perceived would be the best was, and what was the difference between those people and the people who got to the top?
So I would say the best, in my experience, the best people I would like to work with, and the best people that do things are the best problem solvers. People that can see things quickly, can put things together, understand what's going on, and solve problems. And I think entrepreneurs are the really great entrepreneurs are the best of that. And that's what I would define as the best kind of employees, the best workers, the best bosses, the best of them. Are the people that have the intellectual quotient and the emotional quotient. So you need IQ and EQ to do this. Yeah. And I think those people that have IQ and EQ can look at things, make complicated things simple, solve problems, actually solve them, motivate people towards solutions, and then move on. That's why I think they're the best. You don't find those people. I don't, anyway, from my experience, you don't find the best of those people in corporate organizations. The people that do get far, again, this is a broad brush, it's very unfair, because I got some very close friends who are very, very good at what they do in big organizations. But as a generalization, you get people who are very, very smart, can do lots of good things, but also play the game well. And this is the bit that I realized that I didn't, I could have probably played the game better. In hindsight, now I know how the game's played. I could go back and play it well if I had a time machine. But people who could play the game well, and if I'm honest as well, in those days, it was probably slightly different in these days, but in those days, who looked the part, sounded the part, were polished properly, and all that kind of stuff, those are the people that got far. And again, they're not all idiots, they're all smart people, but they understood the game, they played the game well, they played their numbers, they were probably a little bit selfish, and they would probably admit that to you too, and those are people that got far.
And again, it's like that old saying that don't blame the player, blame the game. It's the game that people have to play to get where they need to get.
And I realised that I didn't want to play that game.
Yeah.
I probably, my value system, my culture probably wasn't good enough. I've always, and again, rightly or wrongly, I've been a bit of purist on this kind of meritocracy thing. I've always wanted to think that I've got places because I've worked hard and I'm the best. And I believe that people should get where they want to get to because they're the best. And that's a very purist view of the world. The world's not as pure as that, unfortunately. But, I was very much about, kind of meritocracy. I never wanted to get anywhere because of positive discrimination, because of color from my skin. Oh, let's just promote him because he's brown, tick a box. I never wanted that to be me. Nor did I want to be, let's not promote him because of the color of his skin or whatever. Right? I just wanted to be judged as me for doing a good job. And if I'm the best, then I get to where I get to. So I realized that if I really tried hard and I did my best, I may not get all the benefits of that if I stayed where I wanted to get to. And also I realized that I was never going to, this kind of being this big cog in a big machine, for me, is kind of bullshit. I thought that the best way to affect society, to make positive change in society, not just my own life, is to control a large company, let's call it Tesco. If you're the CEO of Tesco, I think at the time I joined, now Tesco's is not quite the strength it probably was, but I think £1 in 9 or something was spent at Tesco in the country, something silly.
It's crazy.
So I sat there and I thought, well, if that's the case, if I can get to the top of those organizations and be a big cog in a big machine and make positive moves, positive changes, the amount of lives I could affect by driving a big oil tanker is actually very powerful. So then I go to the end of my career, I look back and I go, I've done something good for society, for the world, whatever it is. And I've helped myself on the way. Felt good. I realized actually very quickly that being a big cog in a big machine, you can't really do the things you think you can do. And then I realized that where you can do that is actually being a big cog in a small machine.
So you leave Tesco, and then what did you go and do?
So I left Tesco. Again, you'll see a pattern through my career, if you haven't figured out already, which is not knowing what to do, jumping to different things that look good. I don't think I've never left a company to join another one, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by that?
So I've never been in a job and said, I'm going to apply for another job, get the offer, then hand in my notice and then go and join that company the next day, which is what most people do, right?
Yeah.
They end up going, I'm not happy here, or I want to do something different. I'll go and interview. So I've never had to put a CV together since I was 18, 19. I've never had a CV for this reason. I've been fortunate enough to either get headhunted or through a network or through friends or whatever it is. So, that's just me. And so I left Tesco without a job. I just thought it's not for me, not right. And I left, and I was just hanging around doing nothing for a while, which is quite nice because I've kind of every day of my life I'd been working almost. And I got offered a chance to go back to the West Coast. So I went back to San Francisco this time to do some consultancy work with a friend of mine that ran a consultancy business. So I did that for about a year. It's actually a bit awkward timing. I got engaged, and then my wife now moved in with me, with my mum, who was living with me 6 months of the year, and 6 months she lived overseas. So my new fiance moved in with me, and my mum at the time, and then I left like 6 weeks later to go to America, which was a bit awkward. don't make that mistake, because that's a bit of it was fine actually. It worked out well. But anyway,
Worked out in the end.
I went back to the West Coast for a year, just did some consultancy work again, just to pay some bills. It was good fun, and I enjoyed it. And then I got a call from a headhunter again. I just don't know how these things work, but I was fortunate enough to get a call from a headhunter to go and work for Itsu, which is where I've just left, and that was 7 years ago. And again, they approached me to come and take a senior position as the CFO. They just got some new investment. They wanted to take the business. It was from 0 to 100 million. They wanted to take it from 100 to 500 million, and they wanted different people with different skill sets to then
drive them forward,
take a business into that place. So they approached me. I interviewed with the CEO over, I think it was Skype those days. There was no Zoom and all that then, but over Skype and stuff, I would interview with him, and I got on really well with him. They would fly me back to the UK to do some interviews, and then I did about 6 or 7 different interviews. They offered me the job, and I just thought, yeah, let's take it. It was a brand I've always known well as a customer back in the UK when I was working in the UK, and it's a brand that I thought, again, I could I could make some positive moves with because it was tangible. It was on the high street. It was touching customers. It was healthy food. It was probably, it was
It's at the forefront, wasn't it? It's like cool brand, young people like it.
Brand, yeah. And again, this is, perhaps I knew this at the time, or maybe it's hindsight now, I figured it out. Being a big cog in a small machine, it was not a small machine, 150 million, 200 million business, but from where I've come from it's a very small machine. And I realized then, being a big cog in that machine, I could actually affect more positive change because, I've got 85 shops, mainly in London, millions of customers. I can, and 2,500 staff. I can touch those people and those customers a lot. I can be a lot closer to the ground and therefore make positive moves than if I'm a CEO of Tesco or whatever it is. I realized this, making big positive change, I thought when I was early on in my career was about being a big cog in a big machine, running the biggest company and being the biggest person in that thing. That person is so far away from the customer or from actually what's going on. You can't actually affect positive change. The person that affects positive change in Tesco is like the store manager who is making those people's lives a better day every day. That's the person that actually makes people's lives better in a tangible place. But anyway, so I joined Itsu. I had 7 years there. I was a CFO there. Then I was fortunate enough that they saw enough in me to give me the CEO position. So then I got promoted to be CEO of Itsu.
And then you sat back and said, I've made it. I've arrived.
I said, I've made it and quit now. And then I took the business through COVID and all that kind of stuff. I put the business into administration, took it out, which was...
And that was a huge feat.
It was probably the best and worst thing I've ever done in my career. Best because it taught me a lot about myself personally and professionally. Weirdly, I think I just enjoyed the intellectual challenge of it and actually kind of thrived on the intellectual challenge, but it was really hard work, high pressure. I pretty much did it all on my own because I was a CFO and the CEO at the same time, just because I hadn't hired somebody then and then COVID happened. So I did it all on my own, which was painful. I felt the burden of 2,500 people, their jobs, their careers, their family, all that stuff. And then it was COVID and it was all mad. I had a young son at the time who was just born and it was all a bit mad. So it really took its toll on me, mentally and physically. Now only I realize. At the time it was very intense and it was really quite enjoyable in a very masochistic way or whatever. It was very enjoyable, but more intellectually enjoyable.
I suppose almost it was enjoyable because of the stress of the situation as well.
Yeah, I think so.
And like you said, this thing about you always wanting to make an impact and affect change, this was it, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, I think
if there was a moment, this was it.
I think that's it. As I look back on my career at Itsu, I had a great time there. I feel like I've done some good stuff and I've impacted some positive change. But a lot for the people that work for you. As you learn about leadership and you learn about what it takes to be a good leader, if I can call myself that, this is all about caring for your people, looking after your people, doing the right thing for them. There's this great book by Simon Sinek, which I love the phrase, which is "leaders eat last." And I just really believe in this thing about putting other people first and thinking about them and all that kind of stuff. But I had 6-7 great years. I did some amazing stuff. It's an amazing brand that carries on after me, and hopefully I've left a bit of my legacy in there and left the business in a good place to go flourish. But yeah, it was a great time and also a difficult time for lots of reasons.
So what would you say was some of the biggest lessons that you've learned over that period from university up to leaving?
It's a long
time. I know it's a lot, but if you were to summarize to somebody, a young person working who's going to start a journey in the corporate world, what are some of the key takeaways? You've talked about, for example, sometimes you just have to play the game.
Yeah.
If you want to be the CEO of a big company, you're not going to make as much change as you potentially thought or envisaged you would. But are there some other key
I think
takeaways?
If I was to wrap it all up, maybe it might be helpful into one phrase or statement or learning is, I spent, I don't know what, from 10 years old maybe, when I was taught what it's like to be successful, even when I was studying for my GCSEs, all the way through, I thought, so I was striving to get to a place. And I probably got there with it too. I was a CEO of a great brand, 200 million, one of the best brands on the high street, I think. And I was under 4, I was 39 when I got there, so, but if you wrote down a piece of paper, most people go, that's a decent effort.
That's amazing, yeah.
And when I got there, so if you ask me what it would be like when I was 18 or 20 to get, I'd be like, wow, my life would be like this and that'd be amazing. And I got there, and my life is amazing, and I love my life. But I got to that place and I was like, is this it? Is this what all my sacrifices, all the things I didn't do, all the times I could have done other things, is this it? And I think this is the learning for me, that if you have to, I think of the right phrase. If I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self or whatever something different, I'd say you have to figure out how to define success. And this is, I think, and only now I'm realizing this after 20 years, and I wish I could go back and tell other 20-year-olds this, but you've got to figure out what success means to you. And I didn't figure it out, and I just let life and society and my parents and my friends and my pride and all these different things tell me what success was. I thought it was, like probably most people, so I don't think I'm different. I think people now are a lot more in tune with this thought process, but I thought it was the size of the car you drive, how pretty your girlfriend is, the size of your bank account, your title, and all these kind of things. And now I look back at it, I go, it's really not. Because once you get all of those, you go, oh no, that doesn't make me happy. That stuff does, and then you think about the things that did make me happy through my career. It's about helping people. It's about going, I remember during COVID and this thing that we did with the company, the amount of messages I got from people going, thank you so much for saving my job, for saving this. This means I don't have to move back to Poland, or I don't have to move back here. And I just changed that person's life. And then, we went, just after COVID, 2022, we made a big move on the high street to put pay up. More than McDonald's, more than IKEA, more than these big companies. Itsu should never really lead the way in pay. It's not that kind of company, right? But we decided we were going to make a big play. And lots of companies talk about people and doing the right thing for people, and they don't actually. So we thought, what, screw it. We're going to make a big effort. It's going to hurt the bottom line. It's going to hurt for a couple of years, but this is the right thing to do. And the amount of people that wrote into me going, you don't know what you've done. It was like 2 quid an hour, 3 quid an hour, which for us maybe might not be a lot, but when you're only on 10 quid an hour, it's a lot of money for people that don't have money. The amount of people that wrote into me going, you've just changed my life. Or, I couldn't afford to give my mum that operation, and now I can because I know I'm getting X. These small things, which actually happened. Someone wrote to me and said, I've been saving up for my mum's operation, and now you've done this, I can't. I never thought about doing that for that reason. So then you go, what is success? What does really define you? What should you be striving for, making career paths and moves and whatever? And those are the things that I'm most proud of. Not the size of my car, not the size of my bank account.
And I think, it's that thing about, in the last 20 years, you're not going to remember how much money you had in your bank account at various points of your career. What you're going to remember is the letter that somebody sent you saying you were able to help me pay for an operation for my mum. The time that you made that big decision in your life that you went to LA because you thought about the upside rather than like what's the worst that can happen.
Life is all about experiences. It's not about things. And this is, it's a bit of a wanky statement, but you see people who travel a lot and spend all their money on travel. They're like, I don't want to save it up for a house or a car or whatever. I want to go and live experiences. And the bit I've learned as well, working in this industry is actually really, really good. It's very easy to talk about. You say money is not important. You can only say that when you have money. Yeah. So there's all these people that walk around the internet and YouTube and conferences going, oh, you shouldn't work for money.
But it's easy for them to say.
They're all sitting in their 4-bedroom house, 5-bedroom house, driving their Bentleys, whatever, and saying money's not important. Money is super important when you don't have it, because that's how the capitalist world is. That's how society sets itself up, right? It's about safety and security. The problem is we use money. So this is the end of this is we've been trained through society to use money as a yardstick of success. Or we've chosen money as our yardstick of success. The problem with money, it's not finite. it's infinite. You can't end, there's no end. So if you use, be it money, be it fame, be it whatever, fame is not finite either. There is no end. So if you use any infinite definition of success, you will never actually get there, because you can, by definition, you can't. So this thing about reframing success, when is enough enough? When do you have enough money? That's a very different question. You ask different people, they need different things. If you ask someone that can't put a roof over their head and can't feed their kids, it's a different story to someone who has money. So you have to be very careful just talking about, I have to be very careful talking about money in my position. Yeah. But I've also come from a place where I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It's the interesting thing with money. It's everything when you don't have it. Then you get to a place, hopefully, where you work hard and you earn money, whatever. But the problem is we just keep going. And we don't stop.
And I think another reason that people like you and I are able to sit there and say, look, money might not be the be all and end all, is because we've had the good fortune to be the product of second, third generation immigrant parents
100%.
Who had to make those sacrifices to work hard so we could have those choices. And at that point in your life, when you were 18, 19, that was what you've been conditioned to go and do, because your parents had said, you don't have to go and work in a factory. You don't have to go and, with the greatest respect, stack shelves for a living. This is a great opportunity to have a stable job. And when you get there, because of all your learnings that you've had in the last 15, 20 years, you're able to suddenly sit back and say, well, I thought that was success, but actually success is now like having more time in my hands to do the things I want to do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Again, this might be an immigrant story, it might not be. I don't know my story, right? It's hard to empathize with other people's stories. I can only tell you mine. But, I came from a place where there wasn't much money. My mum was a single parent on her own and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember my mum having to only eat bread and sugar, because that's all. There were some nights where there wasn't enough food. She would make sure I had food. But I still have these, kind of vivid memories of her, me eating something, some leftover rice and whatever, and there wasn't enough for her, so she had to eat bread and sugar. But those sacrifices that our parents make different sacrifices. I can only talk about mine. I realize now, again, in hindsight, where my drive comes from, my drive to succeed. My drive to succeed is not, again, because I want to walk into a room and say, I'm the CEO of Itsu, look how smart I am and clever I am, or look at the size of my bank account. My drive comes from two single places. Early on, it came from, I know what poverty feels like, and I'm not going back there again. It was horrible. It was horrible, the feeling of, I never felt it because I was too young, and my mum did a very good job to make sure I didn't feel it. But some of the memories that I have, I go, my mum and I are not ever going to feel that ever again. So I'm going to push, I'm going to go hard, I'm going to study hard, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get there. So that was a very early drive. This is why I will tell you, I just took the first job that paid me the most amount of money, because that's the way that instinct. You don't go backwards. Yep. You go forwards in that way, right? Was it the right career decision? No. Was it the right decision at the time? Yes. So you just do it. Yeah. So that was the first bit, was just, I'm not going backwards. I'm not going back into those dark places. I'm only going forward. So that's a very powerful thing that I only appreciated now that I'm older and wiser, I can see it. Then after I knew that I'd got to a place where we won't go backwards, we can only go forwards, or just stay there, which is quite a happy place. We had a roof over our head and water, electricity, whatever the basics are. Then I realized that my drive comes from a single place, which is to pay my mum back for all her sacrifices. And again, for me, it's a very powerful thing. It wasn't to do with me. It wasn't to do about, my success is her success. And I wanted to be successful, not for me. I mean, in a way for me, but really for her, because she'd sacrificed her whole life for me. And if I didn't maximize my potential, how am I justifying her sacrifice? So now this thing about, I tell a lot of younger kids or people, your sole purpose in life, which is, again, a bit of a wanky statement, but you can phrase it however you want to phrase it, is just be as good as you can be. That's all you can ever ask of somebody, right? That's what you ask a kid in a race. Just try your best.
Try your best.
That's literally, life is really simple. We overcomplicate life. We put all these shit in the way, insecurities of life, social media, whatever you want to call it, really makes life difficult. There's this phrase that you tell a 6-year-old, just try your best. It's exactly what I'm trying to do in life every day. Just trying to be my best. And if the CEO of Itsu is if that's my best I could ever be, then great, because I've hit it.
Yeah.
If stacking shelves was my best, then great, because I've hit it. And you've always got to make sure, if you die or whatever, and you leave something on the table, if that's your maximum potential, because of laziness, because of whatever it is, you only ever achieve this, then you've lost in life. That's my view. If you get to here, you've won in life. And that's the drive, and that's now that I've come to the kind of second half of my life, or hopefully the second half of my life, if I live that long, that drive is still there, but it's born out of a very different thing.
So let's move on to, you made a big decision to leave Itsu. And going back to my original question, which I think is quite important in this, is that is a very rare occurrence, that people leave that regular paycheck and say, I'm just going to forgo all that security that I had of every month. X amount comes into my bank, and I'm going to go and start this venture. And now I know that I remember you had done some stuff with Roti King before, but why don't you tell us what it is and how you came about making that decision?
I think, COVID's been such an interesting time for so many people for good and bad reasons, depending on how COVID impacted you. COVID really changed my life for lots of different reasons. I had 2 young kids during COVID, and, I led a hospitality business that was shut down, and all the things we talked about. I think that was the bit that brought everything together for me. And it said, what is the point of life? All again, those midlife crisis conversations or whatever. And I said, what are you doing? And then this question I talked about earlier, when is enough enough? I mean, I was asking these questions of myself, maybe after I'd left Tesco, and as I was working at Itsu and building that business and growing and whatever. And again, this thing about, kind of a regular paycheck and money, there has to become a time in your life, and it's come now for me. There has to become a time in your life when you just say, I've got enough money. Because if you don't, you just keep going. All you do is make decisions. Then I would have left Itsu and got a bigger job. I would have gone and worked in a bigger company, be the CEO of that company and taken more money. Then I would have left that one and taken more money and more money and more money, right? And I would have just ended up getting into a bad place, making bad decisions. I sat there and I said, look, when is the right time to call this? I've got 2 young kids at home. What else do I want to achieve in life? I've been there 7 years. Do I want to do another 5 years? Blah, blah, blah. And there's all these other things going on. There were investors that came in with the new side. So I had all these thoughts. And I really enjoyed my time with this. I love all the people there. I sat there back end of last year and I said, right, I've got to make a decision. Am I in for this next 5-year cycle? There was a new investor that was coming in, or am I out? And if I'm in, I'm giving it 5 years. Committing to it, I make my money, we'll sell the company, and then I can go and do the things I want to do. Or am I out now and I go and do the things I want to do? I talked to my wife about it and all that kind of stuff. And I decided I was going to be in. I was going to go, I'm going to give this another go. Not another go. I'm going to give it a next 5-year cycle. And this happened to be in October, November. And I said, fine, I'm in. I told my wife, I'm in. No more ums and ahhing, no more doubts, no more nothing. We're in. We're going to smash this and we're going to make it work. I want to build it, so we're going to make it great, all that stuff. And then, so that was me. Then I went away over Christmas with my family, and I had a bit of a kind of health episode. I don't have to go into it. It's nothing scary, but I had some heart health issues. And I had what's called a TIA. I don't know because I don't know, but I came back, I told my doctor, and he goes, I think you've had this kind of mini stroke or whatever we call it. And again, it sounds a bit more dramatic than it is. I'm fine and I'll be all right. But that was the bit that made me sit there and I think, shit, was that the right choice? Am I making the right thing? I've got 2 young kids at home, a wife that relies on me. I'm only 42. I shouldn't be having this stuff. And then I realized that, like COVID, that experience during COVID, the stress, the pressure really, really kind of got to me. And also the stress and pressure of being a CEO, being all that stuff, and having to raise 2 kids. And, and also my personality type isn't very helpful. I'm very much 100 miles an hour. I'm always on. I find it hard to switch off. Itsu is a very intense place. It's fast moving. It's like a £100 million business that operates like a £10 million business. So all of these things together, I think it just took its toll on me. And I'm very mentally strong. And I think what I've done being very mentally strong is then I pushed all of that down into my physical, and your body can only take kind of what it can take. So anyway, look, I had this episode. I came back home. I came back to work in January. And it was my mum, actually, who came to me and he said, you're very fortunate that you have had this chance to kind of rethink life, because most people maybe don't get this chance. And then, wherever you believe in, whatever faith you are, or you believe in science, or whatever it is you believe in, I just realized that I think this is the world's way of telling me that I made the wrong decision, in October, November to not, go. And I think this is the world going, this is the forces, this is nature, well, whatever you want to believe in going, I'm giving you another chance to make a decision. What do you want to do? And, I talked to the guys at Itsu, I talked to my chairman there, who was great. And he just goes, look, I think you might want to rethink this thing. It's just a job. I don't want you dying on my time and all these different things. I put it all in the mix. I thought about it. I said, you know what, I've got to do the brave thing and the right thing, which is, the right thing is often the hardest thing to do, which is to really take note of, my kind of health and really kind of try to look after myself for the long run. There's no point in me being a CEO of Itsu, making money, doing all this stuff if I'm not there for my kids and they're kind of living off my life insurance or whatever, right? It doesn't really make sense. That's not the whole point of it. So anyway, I put this all in the mix. And then I just thought, enough is enough. I had the conversation, I left 2 weeks later, which was, again, very, very difficult. And the bit I just end with, in terms of again, that's a long-winded story to tell you what I could have told you quickly, which is the bit I learned about, this thing about everyone wants to be a CEO. This is this title because I want to be a CEO. Being a CEO is tough. Whether you're the CEO of your own plumbing firm of one person, you're the CEO of Tesco or Itsu. When you're the number one in anything, when you're number one in your not number one in your family, but when you run a family or you run a business or you run something, being a leader is lonely. It's really difficult because through your career, when you got problems or you don't want to do anything, you just look up and there's someone there to help you. Oh, boss, I got a problem. Go to your manager, go to someone. I can't do this. Shift the problem up and someone else has got to sort it out. When you're the CEO or a leader of something, you end up going, oh, shit, I don't know what to do. You look up and there's no one there. And you're like, shit, I've got to do this. I've got to take it all on my shoulders. I've got to figure it out. And that's quite a tough place because I never had any experience of being. I was a number two and asked to go and be a number one. I'd never done it before. It's my first time. And I didn't know really what that meant. I just thought, I'm a CEO. I've achieved what I want to achieve because I've got those 3 letters and that's great. But there's a lot that comes with all of that, which I think people who are either striving to be CEOs are not CEOs or leaders or whatever. It's the same if you run your own business. The pressures, the stress of the paycheck, the stress of the people, your employees, people relying on you. It's a very lonely place. And I found that quite difficult because I enjoy other people's company. I get my energy from others. I'm quite an extrovert and all that kind of stuff. So being on your own, making decisions and I found that, that was pretty tough. So again, it sounds great from the outside, but if you are striving to be a CEO, you think that's the kind of goal or the epitome of life. Don't underestimate the kind of challenges and the sacrifices that you have to do to also be able to walk into a room or dinner and go, I'm the CEO of something. That sounds great. There are lots of positives, the pay and the pride and how people see you and whatever. But actually the amount of sacrifices you have to do to get there is very difficult. And I know lots of people who have made a decision consciously to go, I'm very happy being a number two. Because that's what I'm really good at and I don't want all that crap and all that shit that comes with it. And actually that's my career and that's what I want. And those people are amazing. And people who go to number one are amazing too. And I think people don't just, not everybody has to be a number one. I think that's what people have to think about as they build their careers.
And you say all that, and you've talked about your health, and you've talked about the pressures of being a CEO, but you didn't exactly leave that to go and start something easier. Starting any kind of restaurant chain from scratch isn't. And
well, not from scratch. So my business partner started a business from scratch.
Right.
I joined quite early on to them build it.
Maybe let's go to what Roti King is and the concept and all the rest of it.
It's a very authentic Malaysian, Singaporean street food business. Started from kind of street food by my partner, who's an amazing chef, not trained. He learned under a tree in Malaysia how to cook amazing food and built a brand in the UK. So came to the UK, built a brand. I then jumped on the back of it, and I'm Malaysian by origin, and it was food that I had eaten as I was growing up. It's an industry I know well. I've scaled a business, grown it.
And I just want to like put this into context, because you're like playing this down, yeah? Oh, you invited me to Taste Festival, London Taste Festival in the summer. It's at Regent's Park. Like, and if people don't know what Taste Festival is, it's pretty much like all the pop-ups of restaurants, big restaurants, small restaurants from around London.
Some of the best food in the country, all in one place
in one
at the
park.
same time. Yeah.
A great festival, great couple of days, and I walked along, not really knowing what Roti King was myself, and all I could see was queues and queues of people waiting to go to Roti King, rather than other well-known high street brands, and that's how popular it is. And I think you were telling me it was like the top couple of pop-ups in terms of revenue generated that weekend.
Yeah, we did amazingly well in Taste. But it's a great business, great food, it's great people, but it's still very small. We're kind of only 4 or 5 shops. But the bit I really like about this business, and again, if you want to talk about learnings and what I've learned from it is, I'm arguably a CEO. I don't call myself that because it's a bit stupid calling yourself a CEO of a 5-shop business. But I am. I run the business.
You still like running the business.
Everybody reports into me, but and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm very much in a startup mentality, doing things. But I've realised. I don't know if I knew this from young, but I think I did, and I think I went down a corporate road because I had to. Because if I'm honest with you, and this might be an unpopular statement, but anyway, it is what it is. When I was young, growing up, there was no entrepreneurial movement. There was no internet. I didn't grow up kind of with the internet. I'm probably the last generation of people that didn't grow up with the internet, right? So there was no entrepreneurial movement. It wasn't just as easy to going and raising funding, and there weren't VCs and PE guys running around throwing money at you, right? The only people that started businesses when I was growing up were people from very wealthy families whose fathers cut them a check of £1 million, £500,000, and they're just like, I don't want to go work for somebody else, and my daddy's got loads of money. I'll just go and start something that I like. Or friends of mine who either got no education or came out of prison, and therefore they couldn't get a corporate job. Right? If you went to uni and didn't get any good degree, you couldn't get a job like one of those corporate jobs. If you went to prison and came out, they wouldn't hire you because they do a CRB check on you and say, no, thank you very much. So you have to go and figure out kind of what to do. And there are people now who are super successful doing amazing things who came from those backgrounds, right? So those were the entrepreneurs. There was one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum. And everybody in between just went to get jobs in different companies, different sizes, different pays. I think, again, this might be hindsight talking, I always knew I was going to end up running my own business and do my own thing. I just always knew it. But either because of my circumstances, because of this paycheck, because of where I came from financially, whatever, I knew that I couldn't just go straight into it. One, because I had the opportunity to do something else, because I got some decent grades. And it was just what you did. And I had to go and put food on the table and whatever. But I think, if you look at my story that I've just told you over long, every job I've done has gone that way. Disney's a bigger company than Tesco. Tesco was a bigger company than Itsu, which was a bigger company than Roti King. It's all gone that way. And I've ended up probably now at the most happiest I've ever been, for lots of different reasons. But this is age, experience, making mistakes, all that kind of stuff, right? I also now see that I'm probably going to be, I'm saying this is now looking into the future, a better entrepreneur at 43 than I would have been at 23. Because I've made all my mistakes on someone else's time and someone else's money, which is corporates and shareholders and and that kind of thing. If I was 23, one, I couldn't afford to make mistakes because I needed a paycheck or whatever. So I wouldn't have taken risks. I wouldn't have done anything differently because I'm too scared of not having a paycheck, not doing all that stuff. So I think now I'm ready I feel confident in my own abilities. I feel confident in what I know and I've learned. And I'm fortunate enough to be financially secure. that I can go and take risks, which would probably mean I'll be a better entrepreneur in the next, 10, 15.
But at the same time, that's not to say that if you are 23, you can't go and start a business now.
Of course, I'm
talking about your own personal experience.
My skill sets, I would not have been a good entrepreneur. Me. I mean, there are people, amazing entrepreneurs at 23, and they'll be far better than I am at 43. But I know myself personally, I would not have been a good entrepreneur. I wasn't mature enough either, probably at 23, to run my own business. But now, because of who I am and my makeup and my skills and whatever, now is the right time for me to be an entrepreneur because of all these different reasons.
All right, so we'll just note to editor, we're going to pause it here a second.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a few questions left, man. Is there anything like you want to talk about? One of the things I was going to talk about was like, what are some of the failures of? So, what are the things that you probably know that other people don't know about running a restaurant business or a food business?
Well, the bit your question asked me is, what would you give advice to people? If I'm being honest with you, my advice is don't do it.
Really?
Honestly, because it's fucking difficult.
Yeah.
So that I don't know if you want that. If you want that on, if that's the bit you want to tell people, but
yeah, we've done about an hour and 10 minutes so far. I'm just conscious because Mickey's waiting as well.
I mean, I'm not sure that many people listening will want to run a restaurant business.
Okay.
So I don't know how relevant that might be.
Well, we can talk about it because a lot of people, it's a kind of a dream thing for a lot of people to do. Like I know a lot of people who'd want to do it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Let's start again. What would you say to someone who wants to start a restaurant or a food business? Because a lot of people do aspire to have that kind of dream and vision to not just get it off the ground, but also to thrive in it.
What advice would I give people? I think it's very tempting and alluring to want to have your own restaurant, your own bar, because it's cool, right? You go to entertain your friends, you feed your friends. It's a cool. But I can see where the temptation comes from. The bit I tell people is, if you don't have a deep passion for the industry, which is the same as anything, I guess, but more the best, because it's tough at the moment because of the way the world is. But generally, it's probably one of the hardest industries I've ever worked in. And as I talk to other people that have worked in other sectors, I'm not sure there's a more difficult business to run than the hospitality sector.
In what respect?
It touches on so many different other industries. So you've got to worry about people. This is the number one thing with most businesses. But if you run a B2B business, if you sell stuff to other companies, you've just got to worry about selling to another corporate entity. You just got to worry about your client, and that's all you really worry about, and your people. Right? I've got to worry about all my customers. I've got to worry about all my employees. I've got to worry about the local councils and the EHO, and I've got to worry about land because I've got to keep my landlords happy, and I've got my food suppliers, and I've got my central staff to worry about. I've got marketing to worry about. I've got IT to worry about. I've got almost every other industry I have to think about. So I've got to hire marketeers or use a marketing agency. I've got to figure out how to do IT in my shops. I've got to worry about landlords and property. And I've got to worry about labor, and I've got to worry about food costs, and I worry about energy because I take energy, and I've got to be on a high street and worry about taxes and rates and sales and customers, everything. So I'm now struggling to think about how many other industries. If you run a tech business, you have to worry about property. You just worry about your office,
and your software,
and the software. I mean, again, I'm not trying to belittle software. Difficult, but I mean, just the amount of things you have to touch in hospitality is very, very different. So I just say, if you don't, and again, this is a feedback for anything, you've got to have a deep passion, because those are the things that get you through the tough days. Those are things that get you through the rainy days. The problem with the restaurant business is it's very polar. If you get it right, it's amazing. Cash flow is great. You can make good profit. You grow business. It's fun. You work on brand. It's scalable. You go to different countries. It's great. On the upside, it sounds great. But if you get it wrong, and you only have to get it a little bit wrong, it goes pear-shaped quickly. And also the kind of financial investment, if you want to grow, you have to spend, depending on your restaurant, £500,000 to £1 million every time you want to grow. If you want to win new business, tech company, a recruitment company, whatever it is, you have to go and talk to someone, and you could win £1 million deal, and you grow your business by £1 million. If I want to grow my business by £1 million, I've got to invest 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million
New restaurant
to actually. So that bit is a difficult bit for the sector. But yeah, I would just. It's the same thing I say. You got to have this deep passion. If you get it right, you can get it really right.
Yeah.
And just a little bit wrong, the whole thing falls down.
And I think
it's tough,
especially in this day and age. What I've seen a lot of restaurant businesses struggle with is just getting staff. It seems like your business might be a little bit more unique in that because you're after a very specific type of chef.
I mean, it's even harder because we're after a specific type of chef. I don't want to get into the intricacies of the sector, but like Brexit really screwed
a lot of people.
The hotels, the restaurants, the bars and everything. And because we lost, if I'm honest, a very, very hard-working, amazing contingent of workforce. And that's what propped up a lot of the cheaper labour, we call it, which is a really horrible phrase because it's very, very good quality labour. And we lost it from the UK. And this is where, again, my advice to people who want to get into the sector right now is, unless you're already in and you're running a business, you've got a brand, I would be really wary about starting in the sector right now. The sector has probably had its best days over the last 10 years. And it's going to be a tough slog for anybody coming in wanting to build a brand and new things for the next 10 years because it's really not easy because we've had the benefits of lots of things for the last 10 years, mainly being labour. There's lots of capital available. Private equity companies were chucking money into the sector.
Low interest rates.
Yeah. Landlords were being sensible maybe 10 years ago, not anymore. The cost of labour is so high now. The price of life in this country is so high that national minimum wage is going to 11.50 next year and might go to 15 quid in 3-4 years. You know, all of these things are working against the sector. So I would be really careful about coming into the sector if you're thinking about it.
All right, Ganan, it's been really good talking to you. I've got a couple more questions to just wrap up. What are the main differences in your day-to-day life now as an entrepreneur than there were working in that corporate sector? What are the decisions that you have to make and how do you prioritise those decisions? So you're making like high value, high productivity decisions as well when it comes to your work?
You know, if I can answer this question at maybe higher level. On a day-to-day basis, my decision-making probably hasn't changed. I've still got to solve problems. I've still got to worry about people. I've still got to look after people. I've got to worry about my shareholders and my employees. You know, those kind of things that don't really change. It's just about making good decisions. The bit, if I'm honest, that's really changed in my life, and therefore how I make decisions, is this notion of freedom, which, again, if you allow me, I'll kind of answer it at a higher plane. You know, I was the CEO of a great business for 5-6 years. I thought I had freedom. Nobody worried about where I was. Nobody asked me where I was going. I could go. I could work from home. I could do anything I wanted to do. I thought I was free. Now I live this life, I realize that I'm actually free. So when you run your own business, your time is yours. I'm not impacting other people negatively. I drop my kid to school every day. I literally sit there and I go, should I go home and go to bed? Should I go to the gym? Should I go play golf? Should I go to work? That's in a way real free. So I thought I was free being, again, this thing about this notion of being a CEO. You know, we talked about it a lot, about everybody wants to be a CEO. I was the CEO of a great company. I wasn't free. I had a great time and a great job and got paid well. But I had a board to answer to. I had to be in these meetings. I had to be in at 9 o'clock. I had to show everybody all these different things. Now I don't do any of that. I can be totally myself. And again, if we go back to another notion, you know, there's this phrase that money buys you happiness, which is this thing that everybody says, oh, you have to have loads of money to be happy. This is what people think. And now I think people are realizing that might not be the case, and with lots of money doesn't come happiness and all that kind of stuff. The bit I'm realizing as the weeks go by in this new life is money does buy you happiness, but in a very different way. Money buys you freedom, and freedom buys you happiness. Because when you've got enough, and this is where you have to define what's enough, 30 grand a year, 100 grand a year, £1 million a year, and everybody goes, this is my life.
Yeah.
When you get to this place, you can then start to be free, because you don't have to be shackled by the paycheck, by the pressures of paying the bills, the mortgage, whatever. So you kind of get to this place. And I've had to, if I'm honest, I've had to bring down my expectations of life. Not because I wanted to have private planes and boats or whatever. But, I sat there and I said, this is great. I'm very happy with my life. I can pay my bills. I can buy the things I need to buy from shops, whatever. So now everything is a bonus. Now I can be free. Now I can run my own business. I can invest in my own thing. I can start my own thing. And with that comes freedom. And now I feel totally free. After this podcast, I can go anywhere. Yeah. Apart from I got to go pick up my son in a minute. But apart from that, I can do anything. And that makes me happy.
But and I think like when you're talking about this notion of freedom, I think what you're actually alluding to is autonomy over your time. And that's what the freedom is.
Which is the freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
autonomy over your life. I think that's exactly what it is. And it's I feel very fortunate to have that.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody has that. And I feel very luxurious just go and have autonomy over your life. It's not that easy. Yeah. I've had to work in it, I've had to build it.
And you've had to discover it over 20 years.
Yeah. And I think if I could just end maybe with this thing, I've told you this story about a young guy that didn't have a clue what he was doing. He just jumped from place to place, taking opportunities. That feels right. That feels good. Never having put a CV together, never actually applying for a targeted job. To now a older man who is very happy and achieved these things and got freedom, got happiness, whatever.
And you're not that old, by the way.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I think deep down, I had planned this. So I thought when I was young, I had no plan. And I was just going through the motions, doing things, jumping from things, going to different places, going to America, coming back, going to working in the media industry. Then it's an absolute jumble of nonsense if you want to write it down. Yeah? Now I look back on my life with a bit more maturity and a bit more, kind of experience. I think deep down, subconsciously, I was always going to get to this place, sitting here with you in this microphone, talking about this story. I just didn't know I didn't know it was media industry and then hospitality and then get to here and then get some freedom, then go and do this. That bit I didn't know. But I think I always knew that this was the right path and the right direction. And so there's this weird thing about life where even though you don't have a plan, like, don't worry. As long as you make good decisions, take opportunities when they come, and you seize the opportunity and make the most of it. Be the best that you can be, give everything every day, all this kind of stuff. Life has an amazing ability to work out. But if you don't do that, life has also an amazing ability to take you in the wrong direction. Yeah. So I think it's about doing good things, worrying about day to day, seizing opportunities, taking risks, believing in yourself, all the things people tell you. I'm now realizing I'm a good example of that. And I probably, because I've done that, I've probably ended up in quite a good place.
All right, let's leave it there, man. Thank you so much. I think that was a great note to finish on. And look forward to seeing what you're doing next.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about the last 10 years of Roti King and beyond.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
Good work, man. Cheers,
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to Life Mastery. To hear more about our podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is my name, Gurmej Singh Pawar, Miji Media, or follow my Instagram page, which is events_Gurmej. And we also have a website, which is www.mijimedia.com. And all other ways to follow us will be available in the show notes, including TikTok, X, LinkedIn, and all the rest of it. Thanks again for listening, and speak to you soon.